Ever since the early 1920s, cartoons have been entertaining the masses in one form or another. Whether it was animated shorts shown in theaters before a movie, or featured in newsreels in between news segments, or as full-blown TV shows, there's no denying that cartoons simply have an appeal to them that suits short-form entertainment better than a long-form. Which does make sense, seeing as cartoons are often very funny by nature, and comedies are noted to be at their best when they don't overstay their welcome. But that being said, most would be surprised to learn that the most profitable, successful cartoon short to ever be released actually came out in the 1930s and was released by Walt Disney just before production began on his masterpiece Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And today, I'd like to go over this short and explain what helped make it the most successful cartoon of all time. And normally I'd say there'll be spoilers ahead, but considering even if you haven't seen the short, everybody already knows what happens anyway, I'm not even going to bother with it. Alright, so to cut right to the chase, the short in question here is The Three Little Pigs, released in 1933, and basically functions as a musical version of the classic story. So simply put, if you know anything about The Three Little Pigs, this short doesn't really have much to offer story-wise. Its appeal, especially in a day and age where everybody has heard this classic tale, lies in its music and gags. And really, that's what made the short so innovative for its time, because very few might know it, but before 1933, most cartoons to come out never really had an actual plot to them and were more just a series of gags and jokes for any given character to stumble through until the end. And this was one of the first cartoons to actually have a consistent story for the entire short, even if it isn't the most complex one ever. And another notable thing about it is its musical score. Specifically the song that's been getting stuck in people's heads for almost a century now, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? Yes, that's right. That song comes from this short and was written specifically for it. And that's the point here, because this was the first cartoon to have music, as well as entire songs, written for the short rather than already existing public domain pieces or classical music of the era. And this is significant because once again, before 1933, when a cartoon short wasn't just focused on gags, it usually consisted of little more than characters interacting with classical music. To put it all another way, in the early days of cartoons, not a lot of effort was really put into them. They were generally just something thrown together to entertain the audience for a few minutes before the real movie started. This was even a major reason why most were convinced Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was going to flop, because most viewed cartoons as little more than a novelty that was good for short-form entertainment only, and whose appeal would probably waver as time went on. Sounds silly, I know, but as I said in another video, which you can find a link in the description to, one has to keep in mind that there was a time when people didn't know what audiences would and wouldn't respond to, and things like this had to be considered. Heck, there was even people that insisted sound movies would be nothing but a fad that would putter out in a couple of years. And yet, here we are. But to get back on topic, the point is that very few people had faith in the long-term success of animation and cartoons, and Walt Disney was one of the few who saw the almost unlimited potential of the medium that many of his time, that being the later 1920s and early 1930s, did not. But before he proved the viability, staying power, and potential of animation with Snow White, he first did it on a smaller scale with the Three Little Pigs. Because, as I noted before, this was really the first cartoon of its kind out there. It actually had a plot that ran the entire length of the short, and had its own musical score written specifically for it. And again, at the time the short was made, only Walt Disney would go to the trouble of spending all that extra money for a simple little cartoon. But it ended up paying off big time, as audiences absolutely loved it. Within weeks of its release, the song "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf" had become a classic all its own, and still ranks as such to this day. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, the song's title was the inspiration behind the title of the famous play, "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?", only further showing just how iconic the song has become. But the same very much applies to the rest of the short as well. Because audiences loved the short so much that they would sometimes go to theaters and pay the full price of admission just to watch the short and then leave. And keep in mind that this was in the earlier years of the Depression we're talking about. Frankly, its success was so unprecedented that it wasn't pulled from certain movie theaters for years. And they even sometimes took to advertising the short above certain movies if they noticed said movies weren't doing too well, as they knew people were more likely to want to see the short over the film. To this day, it still stands as the most profitable short in the history of animation, essentially making it the Gone with the Wind of cartoons. And needless to say, its immense popularity has led it to be considered the definitive version of the classic story by many, even if there would be, and still is, plenty of other interpretations of it in the years that followed. Now, in the wake of the short's extreme success, Walt Disney didn't actually want to make any follow-ups to it, even famously saying, "You can't outdo pigs with pigs." But despite that, public demand, as well as some internal pressure, caused him to release several follow-up shorts with the same characters in them. And though they were relatively successful, none of them reached the level of success that the original did. And moreover, none of its many sequels were considered anywhere near as good either, just as Walt Disney had predicted. And sure enough, he only topped the success of the Three Little Pigs by releasing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which took all the innovations of the earlier short and cranked them up to 11, along with having plenty of its own innovations on top of that. So it seems that Walt Disney was right. You can't outdo pigs with pigs. You can only outdo pigs with dwarfs. But joking aside, the success of the Three Little Pigs set a whole new standard for animation, and was a huge sign of things to come from Disney and other animation companies. And indeed, it was only after the monumental success of the Three Little Pigs did film companies start to take their animated shorts a bit more seriously and start putting more effort into them. Though, granted, the true innovations many companies would make to their animation divisions still didn't come until after the success of Snow White, which proved once and for all that not only was animation here to stay, and that the possibilities were pretty dang endless at that. But it still started with the Three Little Pigs. And in a testament to its popularity, no other short has ever come even remotely close to duplicating its level of success. To this day, it's still considered by most animation experts, which I am not, to be one of the best animated shorts ever made, and one of the most influential in the entire history of the medium. But to Walt Disney, though he was still very proud of the short, it was simply a stepping stone on his way to even greater and more notable accomplishments. Okay, I think that's everything I had to say on that. So now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Did you have any idea that the 1933 version of The Three Little Pigs was the most successful animated short of all time, or not? And do you believe it deserves such a distinction? Whatever the case, please let me know in the comments below. And please keep in mind that the opinions expressed in this video are merely that, opinions, and you don't have to agree with any of them if you don't want to. And thank you all for watching. It is all very much appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.